For more, we are joined by Sajjan Gohel. He is the International Security Director at the Asia Pacific Foundation, focusing his research on international terrorism. He recently wrote a book called Doctor, Teacher, Terrorist, The Life and Legacy of al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, and he joins us from London today. Thanks so much for making time for us, Sajjan.
My pleasure, Jacqueline.
So I want to start with the claim here from ISIS that it was responsible for this attack on the concert hall. Now, it looks as though it's specifically a faction within ISIS, ISIS-K, the Afghanistan affiliate of ISIS. What can you tell us about ISIS-K?
So ISIS-K, also using the other tag of ISKP, the Khorasan province, effectively, which is supposed to comprise of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and parts of Central Asia. They've been behind some very large terrorist attacks in Afghanistan over the last 5 years, targeting what was the former regime of Ashraf Ghani in Afghanistan, targeting schools, Shia Muslims. They have expanded their operations. We have seen them take credit for an attack in Iran last year at the mausoleum of the former head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani. They have also been believed to be operating across Europe. There was a plot in Germany about 18 months ago that was disrupted to target the famous cathedral in Cologne. And they've also been known for having a presence in Russia as well. So we're seeing an expansion of their operations, and that is concerning.
How much of a presence do they have in Russia?
Well, keep in mind that they tend to draw their recruitment, their pool, their resources from Central Asians, particularly people from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. And if the stories are believed to be true, that these culprits originate from Central Asia, in particular places like Tajikistan, you see another example of that. It seems also that the encrypted messaging app Telegram is being utilized to recruit Central Asians to get their messaging out, recruitment, and mobilizing them online as well.
What do you think the motivation would be for an attack like this on Russia at this time?
So it's interesting. We should keep in mind that President Vladimir Putin has taken a very strong position in supporting the regime in Syria, Bashar al-Assad's regime. In fact, if it wasn't for Russia, the chances are that Bashar al-Assad would have been removed during the Arab Spring. That has gone down very badly amongst various different jihadist groups, whether it was al-Qaeda or ISIS. And we know that the notorious private military company, the Wagner Group, has committed egregious human rights abuses in Syria. The other thing is that Central Asians that I was talking about earlier that live in Russia have suffered terrible discrimination in the past. So if you add all these different factors together, effectively it makes it easier for ISKP or ISIS-K to recruit from within a certain community, to mobilize them, to radicalize them, and then to perform these very horrific mass casualty attacks.
Even though ISIS has claimed responsibility for this attack, Vladimir Putin was quick to blame Russia, or to blame Ukraine, rather, not to blame his own country. What does that tell you about how Putin might respond to these attacks? I mean, we've seen quite a bit of military action today in terms of those missile attacks on Ukraine.
Well, keep in mind, Jacqueline, that Putin of Russia has this pathological obsession with Ukraine, whether he describes his operations in the country as denazification or his goal for the Greater Russia project. There is absolutely no evidence at all to suggest that Ukraine played any role in this terrorist attack whatsoever. And as you mentioned, ISIS took responsibility. The Amaq news agency, which is ISIS's own self-styled media propaganda outlet, produced video content, produced claims of responsibility very quickly after the attack. It's got their hallmark, their watermark on the videos itself. So, and if you also go on some of their own encrypted messaging apps online, they're very keen to take massive credit for it. There is no connection to Ukraine, and there's no real evidence that Russia can provide other than to create it for propaganda purposes and perhaps spread the conspiracy theories, which sadly, tragically, are proliferating online as we speak.
I also just want to get your thoughts on what we heard about the warnings ahead of this attack. The U.S. Embassy in Russia had warned that extremists had plans for an attack on Moscow, particularly on venues like this, at big group gatherings, concerts, even specifically saying that. Why would the U.S. be aware of this, putting that warning out there, but Russia not necessarily listening to it? What can you tell us about the dynamic there?
Well, the U.S. has, despite all the tensions with Russia over the last decade, tried to cooperate with the Kremlin over counterterrorism, but they've faced a number of challenges and obstacles. Keep in mind that the U.S. warning that you were very correctly citing, that was issued on the 7th of March, so several weeks before the actual attack took place. Now, people have somehow misconstrued that to mean that the U.S. potentially were aware of this particular operation. They get all kinds of information, whether it's human intelligence, signal intelligence, they get it from their allies, and they often will produce reports, which they provide to not just their partner nations like the Five Eyes, including the UK and Canada, but also to countries where they sometimes have those bad relationships like Russia. And then it's up to the Russians to take it seriously. And very clearly, they ignored that concern. And keep in mind that it was only 2 weeks ago that the Russians disrupted an ISIS K cell inside their own country. So the warnings have been there for Russia, even with or without the U.S. concern.
Sajjan, it's great to get your context on the situation. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, Jacqueline.
That was Sajjan Gohel.